handed the judge a plain manila envelope during my divorce hearing. 30 seconds later, she laughed. Not a polite courtroom smile. Not the quiet chuckle people use when they are trying to stay professional. Judge Evelyn Hart laughed out loud, and the sound moved through that room like glass breaking. My husband, Evan Cole, stopped breathing. His shoulders stiffened. His hand froze on the table. His attorney, the man who had spent 15 minutes explaining that I had made no meaningful contribution to Evan's success, stopped flipping through his notes. Behind Evan, Sloane Mercer uncrossed her legs. That was the first time all morning she looked unsure. Until then, she had been sitting there like the hearing was a formality. Perfect blonde hair, perfect cream blazer, perfect expression that said she knew where Evan and I belonged. He belonged at the polished table with the winning side. I belonged somewhere smaller, somewhere people like them could call respectable while meaning forgettable. Evan had told everyone the same story for 6 months. I was an Air Force logistics officer, practical, simple, stable enough to survive being left, but not sophisticated enough to have helped build anything worth claiming. He had the firm title, the expensive watch, the girlfriend behind him. According to his filing, I had been background noise. His attorney said it with a straight face. Mrs. Ellis maintained her own military career during the marriage. While admirable, her role in Mr. Cole's professional advancement was limited and indirect. Limited. Indirect. I remember looking down at my hands, the same hands that had loaded cargo before sunrise, the same hands that had signed extensions, the same hands that had wired money home while Evan sat in lecture halls learning how to argue. Lauren Hayes, my attorney and my oldest friend, touched my wrist under the table. Not yet, so I stayed quiet. Then Evan's attorney called his settlement offer generous. He said Evan was willing to let me keep my vehicle, uniforms, and personal possessions, as if a man deserved applause for not stealing medals he had never earned. That was when Lauren leaned close and whispered, "Now." I picked up the envelope beside my chair. It felt heavier than paper. Judge Hart opened it, first page, second page, third. Then came the laugh. She looked over her glasses at Evan and smiled. "Mr. Cole," she said, "in 23 years on this bench, I have rarely seen someone walk into court this confidently while carrying evidence this damaging against himself." Evan whispered, "What is that?" I did not answer, because betrayal does not begin when someone leaves. It begins when they start believing your sacrifice was their achievement alone. 7 years earlier, Evan Cole owned exactly one suit. It was charcoal gray, too loose in the shoulders, and shiny at the elbows because we bought it used outside Dover Air Force Base. He wore it to every interview like armor. I ironed the shirt on a towel across the kitchen counter because our apartment had no ironing board. Back then, we lived on the second floor of a tired brick building. The blinds bent sideways. The bathroom sink dripped unless you turned the handle right. Our dining table wobbled so badly Evan kept a folded LSAT flyer under one leg. But I loved that apartment because it was ours. Evan worked part-time at a used bookstore. I was 27, already an Air Force logistics officer, the kind of woman who could move equipment across time zones but still ate cereal for dinner because payday was 4 days away. Every night, I found Evan at that crooked table with prep books around him. He always looked up when I came in. "There's my favorite government asset," he would say. I would roll my eyes and kiss his head. He smelled like coffee, paper, and cheap shampoo. Back then, his tiredness had hope inside it. Evan did not talk about becoming a lawyer the way some people talk about money. Not then. He talked about tenants bullied by landlords, workers cheated out of wages, families who needed someone competent beside them. He said the law was only cold when the wrong people controlled it. I believed him. That was the dangerous part. The acceptance letter came on a Thursday. I had just finished a 12-hour inventory review when I walked in and saw Evan holding an envelope with both hands. For one terrifying second, I thought someone had died. Then he looked at me and his face broke open. "I got in," he whispered. My bag hit the floor. "What?" "Whitaker accepted me, Maya. I got in." We cried like fools. We danced in that tiny kitchen and knocked over bills. For one night, the future felt generous. Then the numbers arrived. Tuition, books, fees, rent closer to campus, transportation, laptop, suit alterations, deposits. Costs that sounded small until they stood together like a wall. 3 weeks later, Evan pushed the paperwork away and said, "I can't do this. I'm going to decline." "No," I said. "Maya, we don't have the money. We'll find it." He laughed once, bitter and small. "You can't move a mountain because you love me." I reached across that table and took his hand. "No," I said, "but I can carry pieces." The Air Force was offering rotations, overseas assignments, lonely assignments, separation pay, hazard pay, deployment bonuses. I volunteered for all of it. Evan said he could not ask me to do that. I told him, "You're not asking. I'm choosing us." He cried into my shoulder that night and promised he would eventually spend the rest of his life making it up to me. The first deployment lasted 9 months. 9 months does not sound like forever until you are living inside it. Until your birthday is a pixelated call that freezes right before your husband says he misses you. Until Thanksgiving dinner is turkey under fluorescent lights with people who are kind, but not yours. Until you learn that a bed can feel empty even when you are too tired to dream. Evan sent pictures from campus, the library, the courthouse where his mock trial team practiced, a coffee shop where everyone looked young, rested, and certain the world was opening for them. I sent money. That became the rhythm of our marriage. He sent hope. I sent payments, tuition gap, rent, books, application fees, laptop repair, parking pass, interview travel, bar review deposit, new suit because the old charcoal one made him look, in his words, like a substitute teacher at a funeral. I laughed when he said that. Then I transferred the money. At first, every dollar felt like love with a receipt attached. I did not think of it as sacrifice. I thought of it as building. People build marriages in different ways. Some build nurseries, some build homes. I built a man a bridge into a life he promised would hold both of us. The second deployment was almost 11 months. I spent our anniversary sitting outside a communications trailer because the signal was better there. Evan had a study group, so he was late to the call. When his face finally appeared, he looked exhausted and beautiful in that reckless way ambition makes people beautiful before it makes them cruel. "I hate that you're there," he said. "I know. No, Maya, I mean it. I couldn't do this without you." That sentence kept me warm for longer than it should have. By his second year, everything got harder. His rent increased, financial aid shifted. A scholarship he expected did not come through. One night he called me breathing like he had been running. "I might have to pause school," he said. The words scared him so badly he could barely say them. I was in a barracks hallway with one boot untied and a vending machine humming behind me. I remember pressing my forehead against the painted wall and closing my eyes. "How much?" He did not answer at first. "Evan, almost 52,000. For a second, I could hear nothing but that vending machine. Then I said, "Okay." He cried. I did not then. Lauren was the only person I told. She was in law school herself, drowning in books and student debt, but her voice went sharp the second she heard the number. "Maya, document it. He's my husband." And husbands still sign papers. I hated how cold that sounded. Evan hated it more. When I brought up the agreement, he looked wounded, like I had turned love into a transaction. "You really think I'd forget what you're doing for me?" he asked. "No," I said. I think someday we might be grateful everything is clear." So he signed a notarized repayment acknowledgement, legal education support, funds advanced by Maya Ellis, repayment upon full-time legal employment. I thought marriage meant trusting the promise more than the paper anyway. I filed it away and tried never to think about it again. That winter, Evan came home, rested his head on my shoulder, and whispered, "Everything I become belongs to both of us." God help me, I believed him. Back then, the paper felt unnecessary. Years later, it became the first document that made a judge laugh. Success did not hit Evan all at once. That would have been easier to recognize. If he had come home one day with a new voice and a new cruelty, maybe I would have known what to do with it. But success entered our marriage quietly. A better jacket, a cleaner haircut, a pause before he introduced me. By the time I noticed the change, he had started calling it growth. Evan graduated near the top of his class. I watched him cross that stage while my uniform pressed stiff against my shoulders. I had flown in on leave, half awake from travel. When they called his name, I clapped like my hands belonged to both of us. Afterward, he hugged professors, shook hands with partners, posed for photos with people who had never worried about fees. I stood beside him, proud and invisible. Then came the job offer. A corporate firm in Philadelphia, glass offices, private clients. A salary number made Evan read the email 3 times. "We did it," I said. He smiled, but not at me exactly. More like he was looking past me at the doorway that had opened. For months, I told myself he was overwhelmed. The firm was demanding. The hours were brutal. The people were polished in a way that made kindness feel rehearsed. Evan talked about partners, client dinners, charity boards, and names I was supposed to remember. When I came home from a rotation, he met me at the airport in a tailored coat. He looked good. Too good. Like someone had edited the old Evan out and left only the version that photographed well. His hug was short. Not cold, not yet, just enough for me to notice. In the car, he talked about a partner named Whitman, the private dinner, the judge who stopped by, the client who owned medical centers. He did not ask how the rotation had gone until we were home. Then his eyes moved to my uniform. "Do you have to wear that through the airport?" he asked. I laughed because laughing was easier than hearing it. "It's the Air Force, Evan. They frown on me showing up in pajamas." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. A few weeks later, he asked me to attend a firm reception. I wore a navy dress I bought on sale and heels that hurt before we reached the parking garage. When I came out, Evan looked up from his phone. He paused. "Just 1 second. You look nice," he said. Nice, not beautiful, proud. At reception, I met Sloane Mercer. Cream blazer, perfect hair, smile sharp enough to cut quietly. "Evan has told me so much about you," she said. "It must be fascinating being in such a structured environment." Evan chuckled. I waited for him to say something. He did not. That was when I understood. He was not embarrassed by where he came from. He was embarrassed by who had carried him out. Sloane Mercer became part of our marriage before I was willing to admit she had. At first, she was only a name. Sloane found a better restaurant for the client dinner. Sloane knew which partner hated small talk. Sloane said Evan needed a cleaner watch. Sloane thought his closing argument in a mock negotiation was brilliant. Every story came home wearing her perfume. I would be folding laundry after a 14-hour day, and Evan would stand in the kitchen talking about something she had said, as if I had been waiting all evening for updates from another woman's mouth. One night I asked, "Do you realize how often you talk about her?" He looked up from his laptop like I had thrown something. "Seriously?" It was a question. "No," he said, and it wasn't. That was the first time he made me feel guilty for noticing what was happening right in front of me. After that, the comments started landing sharper. My jacket was too plain. My hair was too severe. My shoes looked practical, and he said practical like it was a disease. He told me I did not have to turn every conversation into a briefing. He said I walked into rooms like I was looking for exits. I almost told him that was because I had been trained to survive rooms where careless people made dangerous decisions. Instead, I stayed quiet. The charity gala was the night I stopped confusing silence with peace. Evan's firm hosted it at a hotel with marble floors, low lighting, and women who smelled like money before they spoke. I arrived from a formal military event, still in a dark dress uniform coat because I had changed as much as time allowed. Evan saw me near the entrance and frowned so quickly most people would have missed it. I did not. Sloane appeared beside him in a silver dress that looked poured onto her. She smiled at me with all her teeth and none of her warmth. "Maya," she said, "you are brave. I could never come straight from work to something like this." Evan chuckled. Just once, quietly. But I heard it. Brave did not mean brave. It meant inappropriate. It meant obvious. It meant she had found a nicer word for embarrassing. Later, while Evan worked the room, I stood near the bar holding a glass of water I did not want. Sloane came beside me and looked across the room at him. "He is really finding himself here," she said. I looked at her. She smiled. "Some people need the right environment before they become who they are supposed to be." I said, "Funny. I thought he became that while I was paying for law school." Her smile moved, but her eyes did not. That night, Evan accused me of being insecure. He said I was making enemies because I felt out of place. I reminded him I had helped him reach those rooms. His face hardened. "I know what you did, Maya. You do not have to keep throwing it in my face." I stared at him because I had never thrown it anywhere. That was when I understood. Evan did not forget my sacrifice. He resented the fact that I remembered it. and that made me dangerous now. It was raining the night Evan finally said the quiet part out loud. Not movie rain, not dramatic thunder against the windows, just steady Philadelphia rain tapping against the glass, turning the streetlights blurry and making our apartment feel smaller. I had come home from a 3-day training exercise with dust in my hair and exhaustion behind my eyes. My boots were still by the door. My duffel bag leaned against the wall, half open, because I had no energy to unpack. Evan stood in the kitchen with a glass of bourbon. He did not ask if I was tired. He did not ask how training went. He looked at me like I had interrupted a room he preferred. For a while, neither of us spoke. Silence did not feel peaceful anymore. It felt like two people standing on opposite sides of a bridge, pretending they did not smell smoke. Finally, I said, "You barely look at me now." His jaw moved. "Maya." "No," I said. "Do not say my name like I am making this difficult. Just tell me the truth." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I had heard men laugh like that in briefing rooms when they thought rank protected them. "You want the truth?" "Yes." He set the glass down, too carefully. "The truth is, I am tired." "Of what?" His eyes moved over me. My black t-shirt, my tied-back hair, the bruise on my forearm from equipment loading, the life I had never been ashamed of until he started looking at it like evidence against me. "Of this," he said. The room went still. "The base, the routines, the way everything with you is duty and schedules and endurance, the way you talk, the way you live." He shook his head. "It exhausts me." I stared at him because part of my brain refused to understand a sentence that cruel coming from a mouth I had kissed for 7 years. "You used to admire that. I used to need it." "That was worse." I whispered, "So what am I now?" He looked away first. "Cowards do that. They strike and then act wounded by the blood." "Maya, I have changed." "No," I said, "you are different. There is a difference." His face hardened. "Maybe the problem is that you are exactly the same." The words landed quietly. That made them sharper. He said he needed someone who understood the rooms he was entering now. Someone polished, flexible, social, someone who did not make every dinner feel like he had to explain where he came from. I asked, "And I embarrass you?" He did not answer fast enough. That was the answer. Then he said it. "You helped me survive a chapter, Maya. That does not mean you belong in the rest of the book." For a second, I could not hear the rain. I thought of every wire transfer, every airport goodbye, every birthday through a screen. Every time he said everything he became belonged to both of us. A chapter. That was what 7 years became when he wanted a cleaner story. 3 weeks later, he filed for divorce. His biggest mistake was not leaving me. It was believing that because I was quiet, I was empty-handed. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Not in a dramatic storm, not after a screaming phone call. A courier simply knocked, handed me an envelope, and asked for my signature like he was delivering office supplies instead of the legal version of being erased. I took it to the kitchen table because that was where Evan and I had once planned everything. Law school budgets, deployment leave, grocery lists, future vacations we never took. I opened the envelope with steady hands. My heart was not steady. The first few pages were normal enough. Case number, court information, names typed in black ink like our marriage had been a clerical event. Then I reached the settlement proposal. That was where Evan stopped sounding like my husband and started sounding like a man trying to bury a witness. According to the document, I had maintained independent military employment throughout the marriage. According to the document, Evan's earning capacity resulted from his own education, ambition, and professional merit. According to the document, any support I provided had been limited, indirect, and primarily emotional in nature. Primarily emotional. I read that phrase 3 times. Then I laughed once, but it came out wrong. Limited domestic and emotional support. That was what they called 7 years of deployments, wire transfers, missed holidays, loan papers, and loneliness. That was what they called the woman who had slept in foreign barracks while Evan learned how to make language sound clean enough to hide a theft. He wanted most of the savings, most of the investments. A favorable division because his career was, in his attorney's words, the central source of marital growth. Central source, as if he had watered himself. I stopped reading on page 6. Not because there was nothing left, but because I suddenly could not feel my hands. That night, I sat in the dark with the papers spread across the table. Beside them was a framed photo from Evan's law school graduation. I was in uniform, standing beside him. He was smiling so wide you could almost believe gratitude lived there. I stared at that picture for a long time. In every public version of his success, I had been close enough to decorate the moment. But now that the moment had value, I was too small to be counted. Lauren came over after work. She brought Thai food I did not eat and sat across from me without speaking. Then she picked up the papers. I watched her read. Her face did not change until page 4. Then her jaw tightened. "They're lying," she said. I looked at her. "He's lying." "No," she said, setting the papers down. "They are counting on you not proving he's lying." Something in me went still. "I didn't keep records to hurt him," I whispered. Lauren's voice softened, but only a little. "Good. Then we won't use them to hurt him. We'll use them to tell the truth." I looked around the apartment. Old boxes, bank folders, deployment files, a storage bin I had not opened in years. For the first time since Evan left, I stopped wondering why he forgot what I did. I started wondering what he was praying the court would never see. And that question finally gave me oxygen again. Lauren turned my dining table into a crime scene made of paper. Not the loud kind with yellow tape, the quiet kind. Bank statements beside deployment orders, tax records next to tuition invoices, old emails printed in black and white, pay stubs, billing pages, wire confirmations, receipts from Evan's trips. Everything lined up under the lamp. I stood in the doorway and felt ashamed, not because I had helped him, because seeing it together made me feel foolish, like love had been a job I worked without reading the contract. Lauren saw my face. "Do not do that," she said. "Do what?" "Shrink because the evidence is ugly." I looked at the table. "I did this to myself." "No," she said. "You loved someone who used your loyalty and filed paperwork pretending it was air. So we worked. Month by month, the marriage became a timeline. My deployment bonus in March, Evan's tuition payment in April, my hazard pay in August, his rent transfer 2 days later, a receipt for casebooks, a charge for a recruiting weekend, a payment labeled bar prep deposit that came out of my account while I was overseas eating dinner from a plastic tray. The numbers kept growing. At first I whispered them, then I stopped. Lauren highlighted, labeled, scanned, and sorted. Sometimes she asked, "Do you have the email for this?" Or, "Was this before or after the second deployment?" And I reached into another box, like some obedient part of me had waited years to be useful in my own defense. Then we found the texts. "I could not do this without you. This degree belongs to both of us. When I pass the bar, it is our victory." I stared at those messages until the words blurred. The old Evan was still inside my phone, grateful and desperate to be believed in. The new Evan was in court documents, calling that belief indirect. Lauren printed every one. Near midnight, I found the blue folder. It was wedged behind insurance papers and deployment medical forms. For a second, I did not know why my stomach dropped. Then I opened it. The loan agreement, $52,000. Legal education support. Funds advanced by Maya Ellis. Repayment upon full-time legal employment. Evan's signature at the bottom, confident, beside the notary seal. Lauren read it once. Then she smiled. Not happily, precisely. "He became a lawyer with money he promised to repay," she said. "Then he walked into court and said you had no meaningful contribution. That is not just cruel, Maya. That is stupid." I thought that was the worst of it. It was not. 2 days later, Lauren called me into her office. Her desk looked like it had lost a fight. She turned her monitor toward me and pointed to one line in Evan's disclosure. "One transfer, $143,000. Recipient, Sloan Mercer." The note said investment contribution. No investment agreement, no repayment terms, no equity documents, no business filing, nothing. Then she showed me a property record. 10 days later, Sloan placed a deposit on a luxury condo. I sat down because my knees forgot their job. "He used marital money," I said. Lauren stayed calm. "He tried to hide marital money." I looked at the screen and thought about every missed birthday, every bill I paid because I believed we were building one life. He used my deployment money to build a life with her. Lauren shook her head. "No, he tried to. There is a difference." That afternoon, she built the envelope. First, Evan's sworn statement, then my payments, then deployment records, then student bills, then his texts, then the notarized agreement, then the transfer to Sloan. Layer by layer, the truth stopped looking like grief and started looking like a weapon. The envelope did not contain revenge. It contained the version of our marriage Evan forgot had signatures. By the time we walked back into court, Evan had rebuilt his confidence. That was the thing about men like him. Give them a knight, a mirror, and a suit, and they could convince themselves the truth was only dangerous if they admitted it. He sat across from me in navy, one hand beside a folder, his wedding ring gone. His attorney, Gerald Pierce, looked smooth and bored, like he was about to correct an error instead of defend a lie. Sloane sat behind him, cream coat, gold watch, hair tucked behind one ear. She did not look nervous. She looked inconvenienced, like my refusal to disappear delayed reservations. Lauren noticed me looking. "Don't watch her," she murmured. "Watch the judge." Judge Hart entered, and everyone stood. The room smelled like old paper, polish, and fear people try to cover with cologne. Gerald started the way I expected. "Your Honor, my client has built his professional reputation through discipline and personal merit. Mrs. Ellis maintained a separate military career throughout the marriage. While her service is admirable, there is no evidence that she materially contributed to Mr. Cole's earning capacity." No evidence. The words made me smile, not because they were funny, because the envelope sat beside Lauren's elbow. Gerald continued, saying Evan had offered a fair settlement, had declined to pursue certain military benefits, and only wanted an equitable resolution after an unfortunate but natural breakdown of the marriage. Unfortunate, natural. That was how people like Evan cleaned blood off a sentence. He glanced at me while his attorney spoke, not with guilt, with warning, as if his eyes could still tell me to behave. For 7 years I had behaved. Lauren stood when Gerald finished. "Your Honor, before the court considers any settlement recommendation, we would like to submit supplemental evidence regarding Mr. Cole's sworn financial statements and his claim that Mrs. Ellis made no meaningful contribution to his career." Gerald frowned. Evan turned toward him. Sloane blinked. Judge Hart nodded. "Proceed." Lauren looked at me. That was the moment. I picked up the manila envelope. My knees felt strange, but my hands were steady. I walked to the bench, set the envelope before Judge Hart, and returned to my seat without looking at Evan. The room became so quiet I could hear the click of the judge's pen. She opened it. First page. Second. Third. Her eyebrow lifted. Gerald leaned forward. Evan whispered, "What is that?" Then Judge Hart laughed. It was not cruel. That somehow made it worse for him. It was the laugh of a woman who had seen arrogance walk into a wall and call the wall unfair. She looked over her glasses. "Mr. Cole, do you stand by the statement that Mrs. Ellis made no meaningful contribution to your legal education or advancement?" Evan swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor. I mean, she was supportive, but my academic performance was my own." Judge Hart turned a page. Supportive, interesting word. Lauren handed Gerald a copy. His face changed before he reached the bottom. Judge Hart continued. "These records show direct payments from Mrs. Ellis's accounts to Whitaker School of Law, campus housing, bar preparation, and several professional expenses. Am I reading that correctly?" Evan's mouth opened. Gerald stood. "Your Honor, married couples share expenses." Judge Hart nodded. "Correct, which makes it curious that your filing describes her contribution as insignificant." Then Lauren read the texts. "I could not do this without you. This degree belongs to both of us. When I pass the bar, it is our victory." Sloane stopped smiling, and Evan looked afraid. The fourth document was the one Evan had forgotten existed. Judge Hart lifted it from the stack slowly, like she already understood its weight before anyone else did. Her eyes moved across the top line, then down to the signature at the bottom. For the first time all morning, Gerald Pierce stopped looking polished. "Mr. Cole," Judge Hart said, "is this your signature?" Evan leaned forward. His face changed in stages. Confusion first, then recognition, then something close to fear. "I would need to review the context," he said. Judge Hart's mouth barely moved. That was not the question. The room went so quiet I could hear Sloane shift behind him. Evan swallowed. "Yes, it appears to be my signature." Lauren stood. "Your Honor, the document is a notarized repayment acknowledgement executed during Mr. Cole's second year at Whitaker School of Law. It identifies funds advanced by my client for legal education support and states repayment would begin upon full-time legal employment." Gerald rose so quickly his chair made a noise. "Your Honor, this was a private marital understanding. It should not be construed as a commercial debt." Judge Hart looked at him. "Counsel, I am not construing yet. I am reading." He sat down. That was when I knew he was scared. Judge Hart turned back to Evan. Did Mrs. Ellis force you to sign this document? No. Did you receive the funds described? Evan's jaw tightened. Yes. Did those funds support your legal education? He looked at Gerald. Gerald could not save him from a yes or no question. Yes, Evan said. The word was almost too small to hear. Judge Hart set the paper down and folded her hands. So the court has before it a man who obtained legal education through documented financial support from his wife, signed a written acknowledgement of that support, became an attorney, and then filed a statement asserting she made no meaningful contribution to his legal career. She paused. Mr. Cole, that is an ambitious interpretation of memory. Someone in the back coughed like they were hiding a laugh. Evan's ears turned red. Then Lauren moved to the transfer. $143,000. Recipient Sloan Mercer. Date 4 months before divorce filing. Memo, private investment contribution. Sloane's face drained so quickly even I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She had walked into that courtroom thinking she was sitting behind a winner. Now her name was attached to a transaction the judge was reading out loud. Judge Hart looked at Evan. What was the investment? Evan straightened. A private opportunity. What type? Real estate related. Where is the agreement? Gerald whispered something. Evan did not answer. Lauren did. There is no agreement, Your Honor. No operating document, no promissory note, no repayment schedule. 10 days after receiving those funds, Ms. Mercer placed a deposit on a condominium. Sloan whispered, Evan. It was the first honest sound I had ever heard from her. Judge Hart's expression cooled. Was Mrs. Ellis aware of this transfer? No, Evan said. Did she consent? No. Was it disclosed in your initial settlement proposal? Gerald closed his eyes. No, Evan said again. Judge Hart leaned back. Then we may be discussing dissipation of marital assets. Gerald asked for additional time. Judge Hart looked at him for a long second. You had time. You used it to file fiction. I should have felt satisfied. I thought maybe justice would feel loud, like a door slamming shut. It did not. It felt quieter inside. For 7 years, Evan had called my silence loyalty. That morning, the court called it evidence. Judge Hart did not rule immediately. That would have been too easy. And nothing about Evan had ever ended cleanly. She took a recess. 20 minutes. Long enough for Evan to sit at counsel table pretending to read documents while his face betrayed him. Long enough for Sloan to stare at the floor, then at the door, then at Evan like she was recalculating the entire man. Long enough for me to realize my hands had finally stopped shaking. Lauren sat beside me and said nothing. That was why I trusted her. She knew some silences did not need to be filled. Some silences were the body learning it had survived. When Judge Hart returned, everyone stood. Evan straightened his jacket like fabric could restore dignity. It could not. The judge began with the filing. She said Mr. Cole's sworn statements materially minimized the financial history of the marriage. She said the record showed direct, repeated, and substantial contributions from me to his legal education, housing, exam preparation, and professional entry costs. Substantial. I held on to that word. Not emotional. Not indirect. Not supportive in the way people say supportive when they mean invisible. Substantial. She recognized the repayment agreement as relevant and enforceable within the divorce proceeding. Evan was ordered to repay the education loan with interest. The court would also consider the opportunity costs I had accepted during the marriage, including postponed graduate study and extended deployments chosen to stabilize marital finances. Evan stared at the table. Sloan stared at Evan. Then came the transfer. Judge Hart stated that the $143,000 sent to Sloan Mercer would be added back into the marital estate pending final accounting. She noted the absence of documentation, disclosure, or consent. Gerald tried to soften it by calling the matter complicated. Judge Hart looked at him. Complicated is not a substitute for disclosed. That sentence landed harder than shouting. She awarded temporary support. Not charity, not pity, recognition. She ordered sanctions for incomplete financial disclosure and set a final settlement conference under terms that no longer let Evan pretend he had built his life alone. By the time she finished, the number on the page had changed everything. But strangely, the money was not what made me breathe. It was the fact that a courtroom had said the thing Evan refused to say. I mattered. Outside the courtroom, Sloan caught Evan near the hallway windows. Was it marital money? She asked. Evan said, it is not that simple. She laughed once, cold and sharp. No, Evan, complicated is what people call dirty when they still want to sound intelligent. Then she walked away, heels clicking like a verdict. Evan turned toward me. Maya, for 1 second, the old version of me almost answered. The woman who comforted him when he panicked. The woman who translated his fear into tenderness. The woman who believed every apology was a door. Lauren touched my elbow. I kept walking. Maya, I did not mean for it to go this far, he said. I stopped then, not because he deserved it, because I wanted the last words to be clean. No, I said. You meant for me not to have proof. Then I left him standing there with everything he had earned and fully exposed. 6 months later, I moved into a smaller house near base. It was not impressive from the street. 1 floor, white siding, a front step that needed repainting, a kitchen window that faced a maple tree instead of a skyline. But the first night I slept there, no one sighed because my boots were by the door. No one looked at my uniform like it belonged in a closet before company came over. No one used the word simple like it was a diagnosis. The quiet was mine. For a while, I did not know what to do with that. I kept expecting my phone to buzz with Evan's irritation. A question about a bill, a reminder that I was too blunt, a message that started with Maya and ended with me feeling smaller. But the phone stayed still, and slowly my body learned that stillness was not danger. It was peace. Lauren helped me unpack the last box. She found the manila envelope at the bottom of a file crate and held it up. You keeping this? Yes, I said, not because I wanted to stare at the worst season of my life. The court had proof. Evan had consequences. Sloan had disappeared after the condo transfer became part of the record. I kept it because for years my silence had been treated like emptiness, and that envelope was the first time my silence had spoken in complete sentences. I put it in a drawer with my graduate program acceptance letter. 7 years earlier, I had volunteered for every hard assignment because I believed Evan's future was ours. Now I was choosing a future that did not require anyone else to validate it. I enrolled in a leadership program I had delayed twice. I rebuilt my savings slowly. I bought a couch I liked without wondering if it looked polished enough for people who never respected me anyway. Some mornings I woke up furious. Some nights I missed the version of Evan who studied at our crooked table and cried when Whitaker accepted him. Grief does not only mourn what happened, it mourns what almost happened. The life you thought you were building, the person you thought someone would become if you loved them well enough. Then one afternoon, Evan emailed me. The subject line said, "I hope you are doing okay." His message was short. I hate how things ended. I hope someday you understand I was under pressure. None of this was easy for me either. No apology for the filing. No apology for calling my contribution meaningless. No apology for moving marital money to Sloan while asking the court to believe he was the injured party. Just pressure. As if pressure had signed his name. As if pressure had written the sentence that erased me. I read it once, then I archived it. That was the reply I owed him. For a long time, I thought the divorce settlement would feel like revenge, the repayment, the sanctions, the support, the assets added back, the final number that made Evan's attorney stop saying generous. But money was never the deepest wound. The deepest wound was that Evan tried to make me a footnote in the story I had helped write. He did not just leave me. He tried to convince a court, his firm, his girlfriend, and maybe even himself that I had been background noise while he became extraordinary. That is why the envelope mattered. Not because it embarrassed him, because it corrected the record. If you have ever helped someone become who they are, only for them to turn around and call you nothing, I need you to hear me clearly. You are not petty for remembering what you paid for. You are not bitter because you kept receipts. You are not dramatic because you refuse to let someone rewrite your sacrifice as weakness. And you are not cruel for asking the truth to stand where a lie has been sitting comfortably. Sometimes the person who calls themselves self-made is standing on years of your unpaid labor. Sometimes the person who says you contributed nothing is only saying it because admitting the truth would make them smaller. Sometimes they do remember. They remember everything. That is why they need you quiet. I used to believe love meant giving without keeping score. I still believe love should not feel like a transaction. But I have learned something I wish I had understood sooner. Love without respect becomes exploitation. Sacrifice without acknowledgement becomes erasure. Loyalty without boundaries becomes permission. For Evan, that envelope was humiliation. For Sloane, it was exposure. For Judge Hart, it was evidence. For me, it was oxygen. I did not hand that envelope to the judge because I wanted Evan destroyed. I handed it to her because I was tired of being treated like scaffolding people remove once the building looks expensive enough. Evan wanted the court to see a self-made man. Instead, the court saw a man who had been helped, funded, supported, loved, and then lied about the woman who did it. When I walked out of that courthouse, I did not feel victorious the way people imagine. I did not feel powerful. I felt tired. I felt bruised. But beneath all of that, I felt free. The revenge was not that Evan lost money. The revenge was that for once he had to sit quietly while the truth described him better than he had described himself. So tell me, honestly, did Evan betray me the day he fell for Sloane? Or the day he stood in court and said the woman who built his future had contributed nothing?